Here now, after all these years, it's rather interesting to reflect back on the time when it really first began and how torn up I was to know if this was the right thing to do, because in the faith that I had been brought up in, this would have been pretty well considered witchcraft or something from the devil. So in the beginning, I was really torn and trying to find out what was really true and what was not. In answer to that, one day I was sitting at my friend Flora's table and in her kitchen, and so much of this happened at her house. And the pen began to move. And this is the first thing that it wrote that I figured out later was poetry. And it's entitled Truth. Truth haunts us like a beautiful song written long ago, music of a forgotten past, a life I used to know. We've shrouded her in veils of doubt, and so she walks in scorn, with ridicule her companion, who's to weep or mourn. She comes so close and yet so far as we see her pass us by. For in the blindness of our eye, we see her as a lie. I didn't know it was a poem until my friend Flora and I started to read it over. And we thought it really speaks of what we're seeking right now, is what is really the truth and what is something that we've just heard all our lives and accept as truth. So I searched the scriptures and I found that Jesus had spoken to a group of people and said that John is Elijah. In other words, John the Baptist is a reincarnation of Elijah, which was to come before the Messiah. And I thought, why did I not get that before? And I think it was because other people had told me that that isn't what it meant. And I blindly accepted that. Also, I read further on, and I had almost forgotten this, but when Jesus met the so-called prostitute at the well, and she was being almost ready to be stoned, people were throwing stones at her as a punishment for her bad behavior. And Jesus first knelt down and wrote with his finger in the sand, and then he stood up and said, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." What was Jesus writing in the sand? Was it automatic writing coming from the Father, because he so many times had said that it is not I but the Father who does these works? So it gave me pause for thinking more. And then shortly after that, another poem came that made me realize that so much of maybe what the things that I had taken in were not as true as I thought they were. And so this poem came. Lies come dressed in beauty like the purity of snow, falling as if from heaven. So how is anyone to know? Lies with facades of truth, and truth with facades of lies. The masquerade goes whirling by, too fast for human eyes. And I thought, it's probably true of every person that at some point in time, something has been portrayed to them as truth, and when you get right down to digging into it, it isn't. And so to separate the two was my goal, was my passion, was my obsession, really. And so I continued to do my writing, and in it I found many things that I had accepted as truth that really were not. And there were truths that I had pushed aside, and they were real. So the confusion was there. And the very purpose of my automatic writing was to try to determine and separate lies from truth. And the last poem that I received, I had been receiving messages from the automatic writing that my name was Ellen and that I had a past life in England. And I would get little glimpses I would have these little things that I thought were dreams or hallucinations or something, where something that I had never seen before looked extremely familiar, or something that I read for the first time. It didn't seem it was the first time. It was like a half-forgotten memory. And then the poem Memory came. Memory is shadow in a dimly lighted room, carried on the breath of past, stirred by its perfume. There's a door that will not open, yet neither will it close. Is there a world beyond that door where memory freely flows? The light of truth holds the key to reveal that sacred spot of a time not quite remembered, yet never quite forgot. Haunting bits of memory, a hushed and whispered cry. Never can they live again, but never will they die. That also made me think later on when my husband was in the midst of Alzheimer's, and his memory was of his life, this real life, and yet it was only glimpses and little pieces once in a while that in the end that he could really remember. So the poem really has two facets to it that I think. One is people with Alzheimer's. They also have the bits of pieces of memory that they can't quite latch on to. And then also it probably includes reincarnation, that somewhere in a past life something has happened and it comes back to you. You don't really know where it came from, but it's like a little spark of memory that's almost there. You can't put your finger on it, but it's almost there.